What's going on, guys? Scar coming at you with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we diving into an Izzet draw deck that is pretty interesting in what it's trying to do. Essentially, if you haven't known this concept, essentially what this Izzet draw deck is trying to accomplish is it's taking advantage of us drawing a second card on our turn. We play a bunch of cards to take advantage of us drawing an additional card, whether it gives us 1/1 tokens or allows us to do damage to our opponent or any target, depending on what the card is. As well as we play a lot of engine cards in our deck to allow us to draw those additional cards. And essentially what we're trying to do here is just overwhelm our opponent by drawing a lot of cards, digging a little bit deeper into our deck to find those threats. Now, on the downside about this, the fact that with a lot of Dimir rogues and things like that in the meta, and the side of those decks is to kind of mill us, we do, are essentially helping them mill us even quicker if that happens. We do play a few cards that help hopefully kill some of our graveyard if we need to kind of get some board presence by putting Phoenix in the deck. It kind of essentially allows us to remove some of our discard our graveyard away from the library, as well as using Rel, which is another interesting card in the sense that when we play her, she actually gets +1/+0 equal to the amount of instance and sorcery cards in our graveyard. So essentially if they're milling us, a majority of our deck is instance and sorcery, so she can eventually become pretty big. Combine that with the Royal Scions and the actual second plus ability minus the actual draw ability, given a +2/+0 gain first strike and trample to end a turn, is actually also fairly interesting. Now, to make a quick side note, this video is actually gonna be a little bit different. I guess I went ahead, I was doing something I think on my computer, and for some reason I actually had my mic muted through all my games. So I'm actually gonna be doing like some voiceover as I do it, so you may see me actually like doing something in game, but I had my mic muted, so I'm actually talking, but I'm not actually saying anything. So this is gonna be kind of like a little bit different. I do apologize, but I did spend a decent amount of time filming all the games, and there was actually a couple interesting games that I thought were pretty interesting, that in the sense of what the game was, how the game kind of worked out in our favor. With that being said, guys, if you like the video, hit that like button. I do appreciate it. It means a lot. Also, if you're new here and you want to hit that subscribe button and get notified when I post new videos on the channel, we are on the cusp of 1,000 subscribers. I think I was just a little bit below 1,000 subscribers at the time of recording. If you are seeing this after I hit 1,000 subscribers, thank you all for helping me out, get us to that moment. So I would like to say an early thank you in case I don't post a new video until after I hit it. But with that being said, guys, let's dive into some games. Let's see how this deck plays out, and then we'll talk about it later. So I mean, our opening hand is actually pretty good to begin with in this first game. We do have some of our threats playing the Improbable Alliance, Ominous Seas, Throw Possibility, and the Pyromancer, so we are at a good advantage. Though we are playing a Lurrus deck, so it is kind of troublesome in that sense, because usually when you see Lurrus, it's usually Lurrus rogues. We play our tap lane first just because it just get out of the way. Our opponent drops down a red, and I'm actually kind of confused because it's like I've never seen a Lurrus deck really play red mana, so it's like I'm not really sure what's going on here. We play our second mana here, essentially trying to figure out whether it matters if it's red or blue. We go ahead and we play Improbable Alliance. I guess there was some point where I was thinking about possibly an Ominous Sea, but Improbable Alliance is probably the play here regardless, just because you want to start to get your token engine on board, and we do have things to draw additional tokens, so that is that. So we're still very unsure what's going on here, just because they're playing red mana, but then they threw a cycle card down. They were like, oh, they're playing Cycling, so it looks like our Cycling opponent's actually off to a slow start in that sense. They haven't done too much. They are just gonna cycle a little bit here, which is kind of like the one nuisance part when it comes to cycling, just because it's a slow, clunky ability. I personally think. We play our third mana, we drop a Pyromancer, and we say go. Sure, we're not really doing too much on the board side of actually threatening our opponent with damage, but we're putting things on the board in our opponent's way, so if they do have a way of attacking us, we do know how to kind of stop them. Our opponent plays a third land. Now they play a Stinger, which I guess they drew because they didn't play it in the first 2 turns. And they're looking at our cards, trying to figure out what's going on here. They do have 1 mana open, which is a white mana, and it's usually nothing threatening because the only spell that really kills anything in the deck is actually their big finisher, which is the spell that deals X damage equal to the amount of cycling cards in the graveyard and gain X life based on that damage dealt. So their graveyard's up to 4. We're not really too worried. We're kind of analyzing our hand, trying to figure it out. Yet again, it's a matter of it's what blue or red, but we already have the Triumph, so it's like we already have the additional. We decided to go with the Thrill Possibility and the Pyromancer, just to kind of give us a little bit more ramp. We ping off the creature just because, you know, you don't want to skin that easy damage in. We have a 0-4 and a 1-1. Our opponent's kind of looking a little flustered, I guess, because their plan to kind of cycle and burn us that way is kind of not going to plan. This is where I thought, you know, maybe I would get hit with like their little burn spell and just kill off my Pyromancer, because they could probably survive some 1-1 pings for a while until they really, you know, metal out, but nothing really happens on their turn, and they kind of do nothing on their turn whatsoever. So it's actually kind of interesting in that sense that they just kind of skip to their second phase and decide not to do anything. So it's actually, I'm unsure of what's really happening here. They're really thinking. I'm just very surprised that they are not playing anything. We draw a card, which is another Improbable Alliance, which is crazy. I guess our deck was really clustered this game with Improbable Alliances. We play a second one. And we kind of hesitate, and our opponent scoops up, realizing like, hey, this may be a little bit too much with two Improbable Alliances, but maybe their hand wasn't that aggressive, so we win the first game. Now on to game 2. This one's actually, I think, a pretty decent matchup. I think we had an overall okay start. We had some, we have some good abilities. We double red, but a single blue, so it kind of makes it a little clunky, our opening hand, but it's still overall a pretty decent hand because we have a turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. We're unsure what our opponent's playing just because they don't have a companion to give it away, but we see a mono green and we're like, okay, mono green, Love Struck Beast, possibly mono green. We get the Triumph out of the way, you know, just because Triumph. Because it comes in and play tap, it's probably good to play that. There could have been a word to get like a opt on turn 1, possibly get that one additional card, but I didn't think that they were that threatening. We see a blue mana and we're like, okay, so maybe like a Teamer at this point, because Teamer is still around even without all the Lucky Clovers and stuff. So we decided to play Improbable Alliance to start ramping up our creature creation. Our opponent plays a third land, which I'm assuming they were just going to get a possibly the red mana, because that's the only mana we haven't seen, which is what they did, and they're going to swing for 2. So we're not too worried just yet in this sense. I'm here pondering whether or not I want to play my island or whatnot. I'm thinking about playing the Rel just because it's a 0-3, it's a decent sized body, and it can hold its own on the board. So this is where our opponent's kind of analyzing our card and like thinking about what they want to do. They're looking at it over and over again, so I'm wondering if they're thinking about trying to burn it, but instead they decide to cultivate, which essentially means they're on the ramp game just to ramp up as fast as possible. No, I haven't played against a lot of Teamers, so it's been a minute since I've seen like this newer version of Teamer. So we go with the Ops just to get it started. We get a Scorching Dragonfire, which is, I guess, a decent card just in case they play anything, you know, like a Bone Crusher Giant or something. So we get our 1-1. I think I thought I had a land drop for a second, but the Triumph was actually just for cycling. So they're already up to 6 mana, and this is actually like they're actually ramping up pretty strong. And this is where I thought they were going to start dropping their Love Struck Beast, but they decided to go just ramp even harder. So now they have their mana, like their set mana that they're probably good for the rest of the game. Play their first Love Struck Beast. We're gonna Frantic Inventory just to kind of get that started into a Throw Possibility. I think I Pyromancer here, and then I Frantic Inventory again. We're gonna ping one of their 1/1s, but I think we're gonna hit them for 1. Gonna hold back the Rel just for now because Then the Genesis Ultimatum, and this is where it kind of gets trouble, like kind of worrisome, just because Genesis Ultimatum, you know, you can do a lot pretty efficiently. They get 2 Dwelling Keepers, which is pretty scary. Now they're starting to ping away our creatures. So they ping away our creatures with the Terror of the Peaks. They get additional land. Play a lot of basics actually for a teamer deck. I didn't realize how many basics the deck plays. They attack for 5. We're gonna take 5. But I'm not in the game to lose my creatures just yet. I think this is where I actually miscount on how many lands I had. So I throw a possibility here, hoping to draw an untapped mana source, so we get rid of our Phoenix to Bash because we can always bring it back. In a sense, I should have got rid of some, like, I should have probably pinged off a 1/1 or at least dealt 3 damage to the base, just because it wasn't that strong of a thrill, and you know, doing damage to their face wasn't great. They Genesis Ultimate again, which is pretty crazy. It's nice to see a Brazen Borrower on the field instead of actually using to bounce something, so that's actually pretty good. They ping away our Rel, which kind of sucks. Now they're like sitting here, I guess, thinking about what to attack with. Now my hope out of all this, my hope would have been to draw like a board wipe. So we're just gonna, you know, block their creatures the best way possible. I'm not gonna block with the Pyromancer. I'm gonna leave the Pyromancer back. We're gonna take 5. I'm gonna frantic inventory to start off, just to get, you know, fill up my hand and get as many possibilities as possible. So we're gonna do 3 damage to something. We're just gonna make sure we get rid of the Terror of the Peaks. I take 2 damage. We're gonna opt and I guess leave open. Or not opt. Or not do anything. So we're gonna go to their turn and kind of see what they do. And then this is where they weirdly slow play into all this when they could have, this is them just trying to weirdly play their Great Henge into 2 Bone Crusher Giants, and they decide to actually play the whole thing. Like, they could have just Bone Crusher Giant us twice, but for some reason they want to go up to 21 life and then Bone Crusher us and also tap down individually, tapping us. So it's a very interesting way of them doing this. And they play it very slow, so it's like I'm unsure if this is what they were trying to do, but I just assumed the way they tapped it. They just decided to just really slow play all of their cards. Now moving into game 3, our opening hand is actually pretty strong. It's not like the greatest because we only have 2 mana, but we do have a lot of our draw effects, so I mean, we're also on the draw. So essentially what we have here is a pretty decent hand to start off. I mean, the Rel is pretty strong, the Thrill, the Phoenix, so we do have some good cards. We're wondering what our opponent's playing yet again. We have no indication on what they're trying to play. I think our opponent throws 1 into the deck because they milled to 6. So they play black, and then we're like, okay, this is interesting. It's either mono black, possibly thinking Esper. Then we see red, and that's like, I'm not sure there. So they look at our hand, and they decide to get rid of, I believe, the Phoenix. For some reason, they were looking at our opt, but I guess they decided to get rid of our Phoenix. It's probably a good choice just because it's very aggressive, but I don't think it's the best choice in like the fact that in the later game, the Rel is stronger. Now we play our second tap land just because it's like we didn't really have a play. We could have like frantic inventory or opt, but I figured we keep it slow because they're not really playing at a breakneck speed. They play Mire Triton, and at this point I was like, okay, I'll just guess this is where I can use opt to kind of like give some mystery to my hand. So we draw an Ominous Sea, which is pretty strong, especially with the way our hand's loaded. We play our mountain into an Omni-Sea. Just because we have a decent amount of draw in our hand, it's probably a good idea to do this. Our opponent's playing fairly slow, but I guess they're putting a lot of thought into what they're doing. I guess it was... So we know they're now Rakdos just because it's very black-red and they play Mire Triton, so it's the classic Rakdos list. I'm gonna throw Frantic Inventory in the bin just because I gain more cards every time I draw, you know, every time I play Frantic Inventory in the based on how many are in the graveyard. So by me getting rid of that, it's not the worst situation. And we actually drew into a second Frantic Inventory, which is pretty sweet. Now our Rel's also a 2/3 just because we have additional instant or sorcery in the graveyard, so that's 2 instant sorceries. Now this is a part where I thought our opponent was actually going to play Kroxa, but they actually ended up missing their land drop on their turn. So they're actually sitting here just really slow playing. Now my assumption would be that they would swing it for 2 just because of Death Touch, and I more than likely wouldn't block. But they decided to Heartless Act their Rel, which is smart. And they swing it for 2 that way. Now we get a Pyromancer, which is also really good in our situation because we can Pyromancer and then play one of our 2 cards in our hand. Which I think in this situation, I think I Frantic Inventory just because I'll draw on 2. I didn't have to sacrifice anything in my hand. And we actually do a backup Pyromancer, so this is actually fairly strong in that sense. And now our Omni-Sea's kind of slowly creeping up to 4. Yet again, we are unsure if our opponent's going to be playing Kroxa this turn, but they ended up playing Book, which put me on an assumption that they missed their land drop for a second turn in a row, which is actually very good. So I went ahead and actually played a second Pyromancer because I was getting a little bit aggressive just because we really don't have really strong creatures in the sense of that they do a lot, but we decided to play an Opt, so we do 6 damage, and then we draw. We spread Royal Silence to the bottom just because we already had one. And we ping 3 twice to their face. And our Omni-Sea's just yet again slowly creeping up to 8 so we can get our 8/8. We don't actually play a land here. I thought about it, but never mind. I actually do. I thought I held it back to cycle, but we ended up playing it and we swing it for 0. They scry because I'm gonna assume they were really looking for that land. They keep on top, assuming that means that they actually drew their land. Now this is where I thought they were gonna play Kroxa just because they were looking, but they ended up playing Extinction Event, which is actually very good on their part just because it helps them out, gets rid of 2 things on the board. Kroxa will just discard a card from my hand. I drew another Royal Scions. We go up to 7 on the Omni-Sea. I actually played the Royal Scions and I actually draw a card, discard a card, which I'll actually just get rid of the second Royal Scions that I have.
My answers lie in the cold truth.
I actually end up getting rid of the Thrill. Never mind. I really don't know what I'm doing. I already forgot what I played in my game. Our Omni-Sea is up to 8, but we don't play it immediately just because we don't want to give them a turn to deal with it. So we're gonna actually play at the end of their turn because we can, you know, remove the counters at any time. We also have a second Frantic Inventory, so we can reload our hand just in case they decide to Kroxa us. So they're really going hard trying to get the right card on top of their library. Now we're thinking it for a minute because it didn't seem like they were actually going to play it, and they thought maybe they had something else in their hand, but eventually they kind of like go with the Kroxa as being the strongest play that they had. I think they're actually just counting out their possibility of gaining some lives. But yet again, they slow roll it, but now they're counting the cards in the graveyard to play the Kroxa. I mean, this is where we get rid of the second Royal Scion. Resolve it. And we're also thinking like what they could possibly have in this situation. I feel like they already know that the 8/8's coming. So we're gonna pass. We then played the Ominous Sea, crack it open for the 80 at the end of their turn, played the frantic inventory, reload our hand. Now we're back at the 3 hands. We're gonna draw an additional card for our turn. We actually do another frantic inventory, so that this last frantic inventory is actually really big. We put the 88 up to a 10-8 with first strike trample, so we're swinging it really hard, being very aggressive. See next, I actually play the fairy here, and I didn't actually do anything with it, so I end up keeping at 3. I completely forgot to actually put a loyalty counter on it. They like the top card, so I thought they had a removal spell, but regardless, I actually think it's not that big of a deal for us, just because we have multiple ways to actually dig a little bit deeper into our library. No, I know that their Crocs is not going to swing in for any damage and make us this card, just on the basis of that we can just phase away with the fairy, in which I do this and lose the fairy, but that's my fault for not putting a plus loyalty counter on my turn. And we say go. Our opponent plays a Mire Triton, which in response we decide to actually play a frantic inventory to draw 3 more cards, or 4 more cards to refill our hand yet again, and our opponent blows up. Alright, so open up, and our hand's actually very land heavy, but yet again we're on the draw, and we have some draw spells and a little bit of early game, so we decide to keep, I believe, this hand. Yet again, we're also on the draw, so we're going second. Our opponent, I guess, is taking time to think if they want to keep their hand, but we keep. They play green and Edgewall Keeper, and the first thing in my head is that we're playing Teamer again, and I completely forgot Rule was a thing. Then they play Temple, and we're like, okay, it's maybe Gruul, or it's still Teamer, and I'm just not sure. We hit for 1. We play second Innkeeper again, very aggressive. We go ahead and play Improbable Alliance. We're gonna probably hit for 2 at least, that we know of. And this turn is actually the turn where I realize that they're probably playing Gruul, because this is where they play the 2-drop, the Brushfire Elemental. And it's like, oh yeah, they're playing Gruul now. And they go ahead and play an Evolve the Wilds, and they kick it so that it deals 5. Now they're gonna hit us for 7. So we're not looking good, and this is looking like one of those games that we're not gonna do fairly well. But we end up drawing into another Improbable Alliance. I actually went ahead and I actually played the second tap land, played tap, just because I knew I was gonna score from Dragonfire. And then I think I just went ahead and I played it on my turn, just because I was like, just in case if they had any way to pump it, I just might as well get rid of it now. So at least slows them down a little bit. But yet again, it's Gruul, so they could have just had another one. But might as well make them waste the mana and play it. This is me just trying to figure out like what exactly they're trying to do. Now, they play a Scavenging News, but because I actually removed their Brushfire from the Graveyard and exiled it, they actually can't pump up their Scavenging News at all. Though it does target our Frantic Inventory, so we're kind of unsure if that's what we want to do here. So I believe we go ahead and we actually play another Improbable Alliance, and I think we end up playing an Opt. And then we draw into an Ominous Sea, which I throw to the bottom. Looking for something a little bit stronger, but we end up not drawing it. So, but we do have 2/1/1s. And this is that point where we're at 10 life, and we're like, this is not looking great for us. So our opponent's looking to eat something, but they just end up eating a draw spell. I guess to just thin our graveyard out, even though we can't bring back any spells. I guess a part of them's thinking that we're gonna actually eat our graveyard. Now this is the turn that you're more than likely thinking that Embercleave is gonna happen, but I believe our opponent ends up playing another creature, so that slows down their Embercleave turn to another turn. And this is where actually it's very interesting as well, because they play Fabled Passage first, and then they play the Brushfire Elemental, which for some weird reason they played backwards. So this is definitely a turn that definitely feels like an Embercleave turn. So their Brushfire Elemental is a 3/3. And they can move to combat. So you know, essentially this is going to become an Embercleave turn, just based on the way they're attacking. And they go ahead and they attack with everything. So because of how I logically thought this, I'm just going to block the 2/2 just because I don't think they have it. And if they're going to Embercleave, they're going to Embercleave the Brushfire. So we block the 2/2. And they go ahead and Embercleave. But the Embercleave, the Scavenging Ooze is really weird. I actually rewatched the video, and if they would have put the Embercleave on the Brushfire, they would have lethal, because it would have given the Brushfire one additional one. And that's me realizing as they're playing that they oops that. So I go ahead and I actually top deck a Storm's Wrath, which is exactly what I needed for this situation, and now they're in top deck mode. So I completely wiped the board out, and all they are left with is an Embercleave. Now the thing is though, it's Gruul, so in my thought, like there's a Bone Crusher Giant coming at any point. They don't draw anything. And then we play an Ominous Sea. And I play a Frantic Inventory, and now we're starting to slowly build up a board, and then we drew a Rel. So now we're slowly building up a presence, and we actually are going to keep the Triumph in our hand just because of the Rel. The cycling counts as a discard effect. So us actually cycling the Triumph actually will allow us to discard a card and actually draw for the Rel. And we drew another Improbable Alliance. We get some more tokens. Our board's slowly getting there in like into a threatening stance that we actually have a decent board presence to kind of slow them down if they do draw something. It seems like our opponent's just drawing like either another Embercleave, or it's possible that's just lands. So we enjoy the Royal Scions, which it's debatable what I could have discarded here, but I decided to discard the Phoenix, which I could have also discarded the Storm's Wrath and pumped up the Rel just that one bit more, but I discarded the Phoenix just because why not. So we're really cranking out the damage if they don't have anything. We're one card away from playing another Ominous, and then we play the Pyromancer just for a little bit of insurance. That's 0/4 that can ping 3 wherever. The thing is though, if they had a Brushfire Elemental, it actually would have killed us here, just because we couldn't be able to block with any of our 1/1s. And I think this is the part where our opponent realizes what's about to happen, because I go ahead and I actually draw a discard, which pings them 3. And this is where I discard the Storm's Wrath. And then I ping him 3, puts him at 8. We're gonna do a lot of counter things. Get a lot of 1/1s, ping 3, draw a discard, draw another card. The deck's very good about once it starts like going, it has a good amount of, it does a lot of this. And we swing at them for 10. And we ended up taking the victory on a misplay. So we are back in the post game for the deck overall. This is actually my second time recording this. I actually recorded this outro right as I was doing the rest of the video, which was without sound, but I figured this one was a lot easier and I didn't have to replay all the games that I recorded and edit it to actually re-record this. But overall the deck performed fairly well, and what we were trying to do Sure, there were some weird things that happened in certain matchups, but I mean, overall, we drew the right things and we kind of got the engine out on the board, and we were able to kind of like take advantage of just drawing extra cards. It really put a lot of pressure on our opponent, and I think that was kind of what the idea of the deck is for. I mean, the way it has the ability to draw a bunch of cards, we play a few things to maybe wipe the board or just make an annoyances for our opponent's creatures. It actually makes it very challenging for our opponent to deal with once we really start going. I mean, we didn't play against a lot of the meta matchups. We did get the Gruul matchup, but we didn't play against any rogues and things like that. But other than that, I think it is a fairly strong deck that can perform fairly well. I don't know if it's one of the top tier decks, of course, just because I don't think it consistently performs very well, especially against those higher tier decks like the rogues and stuff like that. But if you're looking for something a little bit fun, something a little bit different, something maybe that you can play against an opponent who's not expecting it, this is definitely a fun one of those decks, as it is. Though I will say it is a little bit more expensive, so if you are on a budget, maybe it's not, if you don't already have the cards, I wouldn't invest a whole bunch into it, just as the fact that there's some of these cards that are very specific for this deck, and you really won't use them outside of this deck whatsoever. But with that being said, guys, if you liked the video, hit that like button. If you want to know when I post more videos, hit that subscribe button. Right as I'm recording this, we are getting close to that 1,000 subscribers. I think we were a couple away as I was recording, and who really knows when you see this where I'm at that point. But if we are over 1,000 when you do see this video, I want to just say thank you. I appreciate everyone who watches my videos. It definitely means a lot. It's pretty crazy to see where we've come in the past like 8-ish months or so with the channel as a whole. Also, other side note, if there's anything you guys want to know, anything more, just leave a comment down below. I try my best to answer as quickly as possible when it comes to the comments. Sometimes it does take me a little bit while to get back to you guys, but I try to respond quickly to any comments left on the channel. But anyways, guys, until next time, I will see you in the next video.